The first time Ambassador Zektar met a human, he thought they were the weakest species he had ever encountered. Standing barely 2 meters tall, with soft pink skin and no natural weapons, they seemed like prey animals that had somehow developed space travel. The Galactic Council chambers erupted in what could only be described as polite laughter when humanity requested membership 3 cycles ago. Deathworlders, whispered the Kethani representative, her crystalline form shimmering with amusement. They call their planet Earth a garden world, but our sensors show gravity that would crush most civilized beings and an atmosphere so corrosive it dissolves metal. Zektar adjusted his ceremonial robes, the fabric rippling across his serpentine form. As senior member of the council, he had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of species. Most Deathworld inhabitants were savage, uncontrollable beasts. The few that achieved space travel usually burned themselves out in endless wars or were quietly eliminated by more civilized races. But humans were different. They didn't snarl or threaten. Their leader, a female called Sarah Chen, simply stood at the podium with her hands clasped behind her back. She had introduced herself as Admiral of the United Earth Fleet, but Zektar's translators suggested the title meant something closer to War Leader of all humans. Honorable Council members, Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems, humanity seeks peaceful integration into galactic society. We offer our knowledge, our resources, and our friendship. The Velfari delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, pulsed with what Zektar recognized as condescension. Young species, your world sits in a strategically valuable position. The hegemony has expressed interest in your system's resources. Perhaps you should consider their protection rather than this foolish independence. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but Zektar noticed something in her eyes. Something cold and calculating that made his scales itch with unease. We appreciate the hegemony's interest, but humanity prefers to chart its own course. The hegemony representative, a massive Brutari warrior whose species had conquered 17 systems, laughed with a sound like grinding stone. Little soft skin, you do not understand the realities of galactic politics. The strong take what they will. The weak endure what they must. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then, Admiral Chen smiled. Zektar had studied human facial expressions, and this particular arrangement of lips and teeth was supposed to indicate pleasure or amusement. But something about it made his blood run cold. Counselor Grath AK, she said, using the Brutari's full ceremonial name, in our language, we have a saying. Speak softly and carry a big stick. I believe we've been speaking softly long enough. The human delegation withdrew their membership request that day. Zektar thought it was the end of humanity's naive attempt at diplomacy. He was wrong. The attacks began 3 months later. The first target was a hegemony mining facility in the Zirian belt. The asteroid miners were working a routine shift when their sensors detected incoming vessels. The facility commander, a veteran Brutari warrior named Vectar, activated defensive protocols and demanded identification from the approaching fleet. This is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Fleet, came the response. You have exactly 10 minutes to evacuate this facility. Vectar snarled into his communicator. Human filth, you dare threaten a hegemony installation? We have 30 warships defending this sector. I count 27, Admiral Chen replied calmly. And they won't be a factor. The human fleet that emerged from behind the asteroid was unlike anything in Zektar's databases. The ships were angular, brutal things that looked more like weapons than vessels. They moved with a coordination that suggested either advanced AI control or pilots with reflexes far beyond galactic norms. The battle lasted 6 minutes. Zektar watched the tactical recordings later, played before an emergency council session. The human ships didn't fight like anything in their databases. Instead of the standard formations and energy weapon exchanges that characterize civilized warfare, they used kinetic weapons, nuclear missiles, and something the analysts could only describe as weaponized gravity. Most disturbing was their willingness to sacrifice their own vessels. When a human ship took critical damage, instead of surrendering or retreating, the crew would ram their vessel into the nearest enemy. The explosions that followed suggested they were using their own fusion reactors as weapons. The hegemony fleet was annihilated. The mining facility was evacuated and then systematically destroyed. And Admiral Chen sent a message to every government in the galaxy. This facility was built using forced labor from 3 enslaved species. The hegemony's expansion will end. Consider this your only warning. The council met in emergency session. Grath AK, the Brutari representative, was livid. This cannot stand. These Deathworld savages must be taught their place. But Zektar found himself studying the tactical reports with growing unease. The human weapons were primitive by galactic standards, but used with terrifying efficiency. Their ships were smaller and less advanced, but they moved like a single organism. And their tactical doctrine seemed designed around one simple principle: overwhelming violence applied without hesitation. Perhaps, suggested the Velferi delegate, we should consider negotiation. The humans seem motivated. Grath AK slammed a massive fist on his council desk. The hegemony does not negotiate with terrorists. We will mobilize the 3rd Battle Fleet. These monkeys will learn to fear superior beings. Zektar said nothing, but privately he wondered who would be learning to fear whom. The 3rd Battle Fleet was the pride of the Brutari military. 1,500 warships crewed by the galaxy's most experienced warriors, led by Fleet Admiral Korthak himself. They had conquered systems, broken rebellions, and maintained hegemony dominance for 3 centuries. They encountered the human fleet in the Kepler 442 system, near the edge of human space. Admiral Chen was waiting for them with what intelligence suggested was the entire United Earth Fleet, 800 ships of various classes, all bearing the distinctive angular design that had become humanity's signature. Fleet Admiral Korthak opened communications with supreme confidence. Human Admiral, you will surrender your fleet and submit to hegemony justice. Resist, and we will reduce your pathetic homeworld to ash. Admiral Chen's response was broadcast on all frequencies, recorded by merchant vessels and intelligence operatives throughout the sector. Her voice was steady, almost conversational. Admiral Korthak, 3 days ago your forces attacked a human medical station. They killed 47 doctors and nurses who were treating refugees from your wars. Those people had families, children, dreams. She paused, and, when she continued, something had changed in her tone. You want to know about human fury, Admiral? You're about to get a comprehensive education. The battle that followed redefined galactic warfare. The humans didn't engage in the traditional formation combat that had dominated space warfare for millennia. Instead, they scattered into small groups, using hit-and-run tactics that the massive Brutari vessels couldn't counter. Human pilots flew their fighters into Brutari launch bays, detonating their craft in explosions that crippled entire ships. Human boarding parties used weapons that fired solid projectiles at supersonic speeds, tearing through armor that energy weapons couldn't penetrate. And, when human ships were overwhelmed, their crews would overload their reactors, creating miniature suns that consumed everything within kilometers. But, it was the psychological warfare that truly broke the Brutari fleet. The humans had done something no civilized species would contemplate: they had studied their enemies' weaknesses. They knew that Brutari warriors prized individual combat, that their society was built on concepts of honor and strength. So the humans ignored those concepts entirely. They targeted life support systems instead of weapons. They used electronic warfare to broadcast the screams of dying Brutari across all communication channels. They took no prisoners, showed no mercy, and fought with a coordination that suggested they viewed their own lives as acceptable losses in service of victory. Fleet Admiral Korthak's flagship, the Eternal Conquest, was the last ship to fall. Human boarding parties had fought their way through 17 decks of elite Brutari Marines, leaving no survivors. When they reached the bridge, they found Korthak himself, the greatest warrior of his generation, hiding behind his command chair. The humans didn't kill him. Instead, they forced him to broadcast a surrender order to any surviving hegemony forces. Then, they ejected him into space in an escape pod, alive but forever marked as a coward who had abandoned his fleet. The recordings of that broadcast reached every corner of the galaxy within days. Korthak, the undefeated champion of Brutari martial culture, begging for his life while his empire burned around him. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. 3 hegemony client species declared independence within the week. The Brutari military command structure collapsed as officers fought duels over who was responsible for the defeat. And, across the galaxy, every intelligence service began frantically analyzing everything they could about humanity. Zektar received the reports in his private chambers, reading by the light of his homeworld's twin moons. The numbers were staggering. In less than 6 months, humanity had gone from a diplomatic curiosity to the most dangerous military force in the galaxy. They had destroyed or captured over 2,000 enemy vessels while losing less than 300 of their own. But it wasn't the tactical victories that kept Zektar awake. It was the implications. Humanity wasn't fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for principles. For the abstract concept of freedom, for species they had never met, against oppression they had no obligation to oppose. It was irrational. It was inefficient. It was completely contrary to every model of galactic politics. And it was working. The morning brought news that made Zektar's scales pale. The Confederation of Free Worlds had formally requested human military assistance. The Syndicate had withdrawn their fleets from 3 contested systems rather than risk human intervention. And the Galactic Council itself was receiving daily communications from species requesting protection from human aggression. Zektar made a decision that would change his life. He opened a private communication channel to Earth. Admiral Chen answered personally, appearing on his holographic display in what appeared to be a military command center. Behind her, Zektar could see humans working with quiet efficiency, coordinating operations across multiple star systems. "Ambassador Zektar," she said, inclining her head in a gesture of respect. "I was hoping we might speak." "Admiral Chen," Zektar replied carefully, "I find myself curious about human intentions. Your species has demonstrated remarkable capabilities. What do you want from the galaxy?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes studying something beyond the display. "Ambassador, what do you know about human history?" "Very little, I confess. We've fought wars for thousands of years. Wars over territory, resources, religion, ideology. We've committed atrocities that still haunt our dreams. But we learned something in the process. Something that I think the galaxy has forgotten." "And what is that?" "That some things are worth fighting for. That freedom isn't a privilege to be granted by the strong, but a right to be defended by the willing. Your hegemony sees weak species as resources to be exploited. We see them as people who deserve the chance to determine their own fate." Zektar felt something shift in his understanding of the galaxy's new reality. "You're not conquering. You're liberating. We're giving people a choice," Admiral Chen corrected. "The choice to be free. Some species will choose security over independence, and that's their right. But they should have the option." The communication ended, but Zektar sat in his chambers for hours, processing what he had learned. Humanity wasn't following any recognizable pattern of galactic expansion. They weren't building an empire or seeking dominance. They were spreading an idea. And ideas, Zektar realized with growing certainty, were far more dangerous than any weapon. 6 months after the destruction of the Third Battle Fleet, the galaxy had learned to speak in whispers about humanity. In the crystal spires of the Valtheri homeworld, energy beings discussed the human problem in frequencies too low for most species to detect. In the underground warrens of the Kethani territories, crystalline scholars calculated probability matrices that all led to the same conclusion: humanity would either reshape galactic civilization or destroy it entirely. Captain Elena Rodriguez of the UEF Defiance never intended to become the symbol of human fury. She was a logistics officer, responsible for coordinating supply runs to newly liberated worlds. Her ship wasn't even a warship. The Defiance was a converted cargo hauler with minimal armaments and a crew of 37. She was delivering medical supplies to the mining world of Kepler 438b when everything changed. The planet had been a syndicate operation for 2 centuries. The native species, the Krell, were amphibious beings whose physiology made them perfect for underwater extraction work. The Syndicate had purchased their world through a treaty that most galactic observers recognized as barely legal slavery, then worked the population in their own oceans until their numbers dropped by 60%. Admiral Chen had liberated Kepler 438b 3 weeks earlier, and the Syndicate had formally withdrawn their claims rather than fight the human fleet. The transition was supposed to be peaceful. The Krell were establishing their own government while human advisors helped them rebuild their society. Captain Rodriguez was in the planet's orbital station, coordinating the transfer of antibiotics needed to treat a disease that had spread through the former labor camps, when the Syndicate returned. Not with a military fleet, that would have been honorable. Instead, they sent the Purifiers. The Purifiers were the Syndicate's solution to species that became problematic. They were a mercenary organization that specialized in what they called demographic adjustment. Their ships didn't carry weapons designed to destroy infrastructure or military targets. They carried biological weapons designed to eliminate entire populations while leaving their worlds intact and valuable. Captain Rodriguez was reviewing cargo manifests when her communications officer, Lieutenant Zhang, looked up from his console with confusion on his face. "Captain, I'm reading 47 vessels dropping out of hyperspace. Unknown configuration, but they're broadcasting Syndicate identification codes." Rodriguez felt her stomach drop. The human fleet was 3 days away, responding to a mining accident in the Tau Ceti system. The orbital station had no weapons beyond point defense systems, and the Krell had no space-capable military vessels. "Zhang, open a channel to the surface. Get me President Veldaz." The newly elected Krell leader appeared on her screen within moments, his amphibious features creased with worry. "Captain Rodriguez, our sensors show Syndicate vessels approaching. I thought they had agreed to withdrawal." "They did," Rodriguez said, studying the tactical display. The approaching ships were spreading into a bombardment formation, but their weapon signatures were all wrong. "President Veldaz, I need you to listen carefully. Those aren't normal Syndicate vessels. They're Purifiers." The Krell leader's large eyes widened in terror. Every species in the galaxy knew about the Purifiers. They were the reason 3 entire civilizations had simply vanished over the past century, leaving their worlds empty and ready for colonization. "Captain, we have no defenses against such weapons. Our people, our children." Rodriguez looked around the station's small command center. 37 humans against 47 ships designed for genocide. The smart move would be to evacuate immediately, get the human crew to safety, and return with the fleet to avenge the Krell after it was too late to save them. Instead, she thought about the Krell children she had met during the supply distribution. About the way they had looked at her with wonder, asking innocent questions about the stars and whether humans really came from a world where water fell from the sky. "Lieutenant Zhang," she said, surprised by how calm her own voice sounded. "Send a message to Admiral Chen. Tell her we're engaging the Purifiers at Kepler 438b. Request immediate support." "Captain," her tactical officer Lieutenant Santos interrupted, "Admiral Chen's fleet is 3 days out. We'll be vaporized in the first exchange." Rodriguez was already moving toward her command chair, her hands flying over the control interfaces. "Santos, how many people are on the planet?" "Approximately 2.3 million Krell, plus about 1,000 human advisors and medical personnel." "And how many people are on those Purifier ships?" Santos checked his readings. "Estimated crew complements suggest around 15,000. So if we do nothing, 2.3 million people die. If we fight, maybe 15,000 die instead." Rodriguez activated the ship's internal communications. "All hands, this is the captain. We are about to engage enemy forces that significantly outmatch us. Our mission is to protect the Krell population below until reinforcements arrive. Anyone who wants to object can do so now." The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then, Engineer Patel's voice came through the speakers with a distinct Indian accent. "Captain, my engines can give you 112% power for about 30 minutes before they melt." "Will that do?" One by one, every department reported ready for combat. Rodriguez felt something warm and fierce spreading through her chest. This was why humanity had joined the galaxy. Not to conquer, but to stand between the innocent and the monsters. "Zhang, open a channel to the Purifier fleet." The main screen filled with the image of a Syndicate military officer, his uniform marking him as a fleet commodore. Behind him, Rodriguez could see the sterile efficiency of a ship designed for one purpose: death. Human vessel, you are interfering with a legitimate syndicate operation. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Rodriguez stood up, placing herself directly in front of the camera. Commodore, this is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the United Earth Fleet. The syndicate relinquished all claims to this system. Your presence here constitutes an act of war. The Commodore's expression shifted to something like amusement. Captain Rodriguez, you have one converted cargo ship against 47 military vessels. Even human arrogance has its limits. You're right, Rodriguez agreed. This is absolutely hopeless. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and completely screwed. She smiled, and the expression carried the same cold promise that Admiral Chen had shown the Galactic Council. But here's what you don't understand about humans, Commodore. We're really good at being hopeless. The first wave of purifier ships moved toward the planet, ready to begin their orbital bombardment. They expected the single human vessel to retreat or surrender. Instead, the Defiance accelerated directly toward the center of their formation. What happened next became known throughout the galaxy as the Rodriguez Maneuver, though human military historians simply called it creative use of available resources. Captain Rodriguez had realized something that the purifiers hadn't considered. The Defiance was a cargo ship, designed to carry large payloads across interstellar distances. Its cargo bays were currently filled with medical supplies, construction equipment, and emergency provisions for the Krell population. Medical supplies that included industrial-grade oxygen and other compounds. Construction equipment that included mining explosives and fusion power cells. Emergency provisions that included water purification systems using concentrated chemical agents. In short, the Defiance was carrying the components for the largest improvised explosive device in galactic history. Engineer Patel had spent 15 minutes running calculations before announcing his conclusion. Captain, if we detonate everything in our cargo holds while ramming the largest purifier vessel, the explosion should take out at least 12 ships and disable another 20. Rodriguez had asked the obvious question, and our survival chances? Essentially zero, Captain. But the Krell? The remaining purifier force would be too small to effectively sterilize the planet. They would likely withdraw rather than face Admiral Chen's fleet with reduced numbers. Rodriguez made her decision without hesitation. All hands, prepare for ramming speed. Santos, plot an intercept course for the purifier command ship. Patel, how long do you need to prepare our cargo for detonation? Give me 10 minutes, Captain. The purifier fleet didn't understand what was happening until it was too late. The Defiance accelerated past their outer perimeter, absorbing heavy weapons fire that should have destroyed the converted cargo ship. But Patel had done more than prepare the explosive cargo. He had rerouted power from life support and artificial gravity to reinforce the ship's hull and shields. The human crew fought in zero gravity, breathing from emergency oxygen supplies, while their ship died around them. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. Electrical fires filled corridors with toxic smoke. The artificial gravity failed completely, leaving the crew floating while they tried to keep their dying ship operational. But they held their course. The Purifier command ship, a massive dreadnought designed to coordinate planetary bombardments, finally realized what was happening when the Defiance was 30 seconds from impact. The Commodore himself appeared on Rodriguez's screen, his earlier amusement replaced by genuine terror. You're insane. You'll kill your entire crew. Rodriguez, her uniform torn and her face streaked with blood from a head wound, looked directly into the camera. Commodore, you came here to murder children. We're just here to stop you. The impact occurred at 17 seconds past 14:32 local time. The Defiance, traveling at 12% of light speed, struck the Purifier Dreadnought's command section with the kinetic force of a small asteroid. The explosion that followed registered on sensors 3 star systems away. When the energy dissipated, 12 Purifier vessels had been completely destroyed. Another 18 were so badly damaged they could barely maintain orbit. The remainder of the fleet, exactly as Engineer Patel had predicted, chose to retreat rather than face Admiral Chen's approaching fleet with a decimated force. Captain Elena Rodriguez and her crew of 37 had saved 2.3 million lives. none of them survived to see it. The news of the defiance reached Earth while Admiral Chen was still en route to Kepler 438b. She watched the tactical recordings in the privacy of her quarters, studying the final moments of Captain Rodriguez and her crew. The recording showed Rodriguez on the bridge, calmly giving orders while her ship burned around her. In her final transmission, she hadn't spoken about glory or revenge. She had simply said, "Tell my parents I did my job." Admiral Chen made two decisions that night. First, she ordered the construction of a memorial on Kepler 438b where the Defiance had fallen. Second, she composed a message that would be broadcast to every government, corporation, and military force in the galaxy. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Fleet. Today, Captain Elena Rodriguez and 36 of humanity's finest chose death over the compromise of their principles. They faced impossible odds to protect people they had known for less than a month. People of a species they had met for the first time barely weeks ago. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. And this is what awaits anyone who threatens the innocent while humanity draws breath. The galaxy is changing. You can be part of that change, or you can be swept aside by it. But you cannot stop it. The message reached the Galactic Council 3 days later. Zektar read it alone in his chambers, then immediately composed an encrypted transmission to his government. The message was brief: formal recommendation, begin immediate negotiations for alliance with humanity. Alternative is eventual extinction. The response from his homeworld was equally brief: request granted. Terms, unconditional. But, in the crystal depths of syndicate space, different conversations were taking place. The board of directors, the shadowy council that controlled 1/4 of galactic commerce, met in emergency session. The loss of the Purifier fleet was unacceptable. Humanity's growing influence threatened their entire economic model. They made a decision that would push human fury beyond anything the galaxy had yet witnessed. If humanity wanted to play the role of galactic protector, they would learn the price of such arrogance. The syndicate would make them pay that price in blood. The war was about to begin in earnest. The attack on Earth came without warning, without declaration, and without mercy. Admiral Chen was attending a memorial service for Captain Rodriguez when the alert sirens began wailing across Luna Command. She excused herself from the ceremony, still wearing her formal dress uniform, and made her way to the strategic command center buried beneath the lunar surface. What she saw on the tactical displays defied everything humanity knew about galactic warfare. "Ma'am," reported Commander Williams, his voice tight with disbelief, "we're reading approximately 2,000 vessels dropping out of hyperspace throughout the Sol system. They're not using any recognized transponder codes, but their ship configurations match syndicate profiles." Admiral Chen studied the holographic display, watching red icons appear across human space like a spreading infection. The enemy fleet was massive beyond anything they had faced before, but something about their positioning bothered her. "Commander, show me their targeting priorities." The display updated, highlighting the enemy fleet's apparent objectives. Chen felt her blood turn to ice. The attacking ships weren't focusing on military targets or strategic installations. They were heading directly for civilian populations. Mars Colony, with its 3 million inhabitants. The Europa research stations. The asteroid mining communities in the belt. Every major civilian center in the system was under assault simultaneously. "Ma'am," Williams continued, his voice now carrying the edge of panic, "they're broadcasting on all frequencies. It's a surrender demand." The main screen filled with the image of a being Chen had never seen before. Tall, impossibly thin, with features that seemed to shift and blur when viewed directly. Behind it stood representatives of every major galactic power that opposed human expansion, syndicate officials, hegemony military commanders, and others she didn't recognize. Admiral Chen, the being spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that made Chen's teeth ache. "I am Overseer Kethmal of the Coalition for Galactic Order. Your species has become a disruptive influence that threatens the stability of civilized space. Surrender immediately, and your civilians will be relocated to designated areas where they can live out their lives in peace. Continue your resistance, and we will demonstrate why Deathworld species have no place among the stars." The transmission cut to footage of human colonies under bombardment. Chen watched in growing horror as orbital defense platforms were systematically destroyed, as evacuation ships were targeted while trying to flee, as residential domes on Mars cracked open and vented atmosphere into the thin Martian sky. "Admiral," Commander Williams said quietly, "we have reports of similar attacks throughout human space. The colonies at Proxima Centauri, Alpha Centauri, Wolf 359, they're hitting everything at once." Chen forced herself to think past the rage building in her chest. This wasn't a military operation, it was a hostage situation on a stellar scale. The coalition had obviously studied human psychology, learned about humanity's protective instincts, and designed an attack calculated to force surrender through the threat to innocent lives. They had made one critical error in their calculations. They had underestimated just how far humans would go to protect their people. "Williams, get me a direct line to President Hassan on Earth. Emergency priority." The president appeared on Chen's private screen within seconds, his usually composed features showing the strain of coordinating a global response to the crisis. "Admiral, I've been briefing with the Security Council. The coalition is demanding complete disarmament of human military forces and the return of all liberated worlds to their previous owners. They're threatening to sterilize our colonies if we don't comply within 72 hours. Mr. President," Chen said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her, "I need authorization for Operation Berserker." President Hassan's face went pale. Operation Berserker was humanity's most classified military protocol, developed in absolute secrecy after the first contact with galactic civilization. It was designed for exactly this scenario, the complete defeat of humanity's conventional forces and the threat of extinction. "Admiral, that protocol is extreme. Are you certain there are no alternatives?" Chen looked at the tactical display, watching as more red icons appeared throughout human space. The coalition had committed everything to this assault, bringing together military forces that had been enemies for centuries. They clearly expected humanity to surrender rather than watch their colonies burn. "Sir, they've made this into a war of extermination. Our choice is to fight with everything we have or watch our species become slaves. There are no alternatives." President Hassan was quiet for a long moment. In that silence, Chen could hear the weight of humanity's future hanging in the balance. "Authorization granted," he said finally. "God help us all." Admiral Chen turned to her staff, and, when she spoke, her voice carried a tone that none of them had heard before. Cold, precise, and completely without mercy. "Ladies and gentlemen, activate Operation Berserker. All units, all resources, all options are now authorized. We are no longer fighting to preserve galactic stability or maintain diplomatic relations. We are fighting for the survival of our species." She paused, looking around the command center at the faces of humans who had just been told that everything they thought they knew about warfare was about to change. "Send a message to every human ship, station, and outpost in the galaxy. From this moment forward, we are at total war. No surrender, no quarter, no mercy. The coalition wants to see human fury? Let's show them what we've been holding back." Operation Berserker had been named for the ancient Norse warriors who fought without fear of death, but the reality was far more sophisticated than its historical inspiration. It was based on a simple principle that human military planners had discovered during their study of galactic warfare: every civilized species fought according to certain rules, certain expectations about acceptable losses, and reasonable objectives. Humanity was about to stop being civilized. The first indication that something had changed came from the human vessels already engaged in combat throughout the system. Instead of the coordinated retreats and defensive formations that characterized human tactics, the ships began attacking with a savagery that shocked even veteran coalition commanders. The UEF destroyer Retaliation was heavily damaged and surrounded by 6 coalition vessels when it received the Berserker authorization. Instead of surrendering or attempting to escape, Captain Marcus Torres ordered his crew to evacuate to escape pods while he remained on the bridge alone. The coalition ships were preparing to board the apparently abandoned destroyer when it suddenly accelerated to ramming speed, targeting the largest enemy vessel. But this wasn't the heroic sacrifice of Captain Rodriguez. Torres had done something far more terrifying. He had overloaded the ship's hyperspace drive while it was still in normal space. The explosion that followed didn't just destroy the target ship. It tore a hole in reality itself, creating a temporary hyperspace vortex that consumed everything within a 50-kilometer radius. 3 coalition vessels were pulled into the dimensional tear and simply ceased to exist. Captain Torres survived, ejecting in an escape pod at the last possible moment. When coalition forces recovered him, they found a man who showed no remorse for what he had done, who calmly explained that he had 14 more ways to weaponize standard ship systems if they wanted to see them. Similar scenes played out across the Sol system. Human crews abandoned the careful, measured warfare they had practiced and embraced tactics that violated every galactic convention. They used their own medical stations as biological weapon laboratories, creating diseases specifically designed to target coalition species. They turned asteroid mining equipment into kinetic bombardment systems. They even weaponized their civilian infrastructure, using comm satellites to blind enemy sensors and cargo ships to deliver nuclear devices disguised as surrender delegations. But the real shock came when the coalition forces approached Earth itself. The planet's orbital defenses had been systematically destroyed in the initial assault. The space-based manufacturing platforms were in ruins. Every military satellite had been reduced to debris. By all conventional measures, Earth was defenseless. Which made what happened next all the more impossible to explain. The Coalition assault fleet was 30,000 kilometers from Earth when their sensors detected energy signatures unlike anything in their databases. The readings suggested massive gravitational anomalies forming throughout near-Earth space, as if reality itself was being twisted by some unknown force. Overseer Kethmal himself was aboard the Coalition flagship when the first human vessels appeared. They weren't ships in any recognizable sense. They were geometric impossibilities, craft that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, that moved through space in ways that violated everything the Coalition knew about physics. They had angular hull configurations that shifted and changed as they moved, and weapon systems that fired coherent gravity waves instead of energy or projectiles. "What are those things?" demanded General Vorthake, the hegemony commander coordinating the assault. The Coalition's chief scientist, a Valtheri energy being named Silesthek, pulsed with confused harmonics. "Overseer, these energy signatures are impossible. Nothing we know about human technology could produce such effects." Overseer Kethmal studied the approaching vessels with growing unease. "Are they some kind of alien allies? Another species we haven't encountered?" "No sir," Silesthek replied, his energy matrix flickering with uncertainty. "The quantum signatures are definitely human. But the technology, it's at least 1,000 years more advanced than anything they've demonstrated before." The truth was simpler and more terrifying than any of them imagined. Operation Berserker hadn't just authorized new tactics, it had revealed what humanity had really been doing for the past 3 years. While Admiral Chen's fleet had been fighting visible wars across the galaxy, another group of humans had been preparing for this moment. They called themselves the Deep Labs, and they had been working in facilities hidden in Earth's deep ocean trenches, studying captured alien technology and pushing the boundaries of physics beyond anything the galaxy thought possible. They had learned to manipulate gravity waves as easily as their ancestors had learned to control electricity. They had developed quantum computers that could process information faster than light itself could travel. They had even cracked the fundamental code of spacetime, learning to fold reality in ways that let their ships exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Deep Labs had given humanity weapons that the galaxy couldn't understand, much less counter. The battle for Earth lasted 18 minutes. The Coalition fleet had approached expecting to face primitive kinetic weapons and nuclear missiles. Instead, they encountered humanity's true military technology for the first time. The gravity wave weapons didn't just destroy Coalition ships, they compressed them into neutronium spheres the size of marbles. The dimensional displacement systems teleported entire squadrons of enemy vessels into the heart of nearby stars. And the quantum disruption fields simply made Coalition weapons stop working, as if the fundamental forces that powered them had been temporarily suspended. Overseer Kethmal watched his fleet of 2,000 vessels reduced to expanding clouds of debris and radioactive gas. In 18 minutes of combat, the Coalition lost more ships than they had in the previous century of galactic warfare. And then, the human ships stopped attacking. A new voice came across all Coalition communication channels. Not Admiral Chen this time, but someone else. someone whose voice carried the weight of absolute authority. This is Director Sarah Kim of the Deep Labs. Coalition forces, you have 60 seconds to broadcast your unconditional surrender across all frequencies. After that, we begin targeting your homeworlds. General Vorthe K snarled his defiance. Human witch, you cannot threaten entire star systems. The galactic community will never allow such barbarism. General, Director Kim replied with perfect calm, the galactic community allowed you to attack civilian populations. They allowed you to target refugee ships. They allowed you to threaten the extinction of an entire species. By their own standards, everything we do from this point forward is simply proportional response. The main display in the Coalition Command Center updated, showing real-time images of the hegemony homeworld. Massive human vessels were materializing in orbit, their impossible geometries casting shadows across entire continents. You have 30 seconds, Director Kim continued. The surrender came with 5 seconds to spare. Admiral Chen arrived at the Coalition flagship 2 hours later, leading a boarding party through corridors filled with defeated enemies. She found Overseer Kethmal in his command center, staring at tactical displays that showed human fleets occupying every major Coalition stronghold simultaneously. Admiral, the Overseer said without looking up, how long have you been hiding this technology? Since first contact, Chen replied honestly. We learned early that the galaxy respects only strength. So we made sure we would always be stronger than anything we might face. But, your earlier battles, the casualties you took, the ships you lost, were necessary sacrifices to maintain the deception. The galaxy needed to believe that humanity was powerful but not invincible. That we could be defeated if enough force was applied. Chen gestured toward the displays showing human forces across Coalition space. We needed you to commit everything to this assault. To show us every ship, every weapon, every ally you could call upon. Overseer Kethmal's shifting features stabilized into an expression of dawning horror. This was a trap. From the beginning, everything was a trap. Not a trap, Chen corrected. A test. We needed to know how far the galaxy's rulers would go to maintain their power. Whether they would target civilians, threaten genocide, abandon every principle they claimed to hold sacred. She met the Overseer's alien gaze directly. You failed that test. The trials that followed changed galactic civilization forever. The Coalition leadership was charged with crimes against sapient life and tried before a tribunal composed of the species they had oppressed. The hegemony slave worlds were liberated. The syndicate's corporate holdings were redistributed to their former victims. And the Galactic Council was reorganized under a new charter that recognized the fundamental rights of all sapient beings. But, it was the revelation of humanity's true capabilities that truly transformed the galaxy. The knowledge that a single species possessed technology centuries ahead of anything else known forced a complete re-evaluation of humanity's place in the cosmic order. Ambassador Zektar, now serving as the first Prime Minister of the reformed Galactic Council, met with Admiral Chen one final time before humanity's withdrawal from active galactic politics. Admiral, he said, his serpentine form coiled in the posture of deep respect, I must ask. What will humanity do now? You have the power to rule the galaxy absolutely. Every species would submit rather than face your weapons. Admiral Chen smiled, but, this time the expression carried warmth instead of the cold promise of violence. Ambassador, humans have never been interested in ruling others. We fought because people were being oppressed, not because we wanted to be in charge. She gestured toward the window of the space station, which showed the swirling colors of a nebula where the Deep Labs were already constructing humanity's next great project. We're explorers, Zektar. Always have been. There are other galaxies out there, other challenges, other questions that need answers. We'll leave this galaxy to sort itself out while we go see what's waiting among the stars. And, if the galaxy needs you again? Chen's smile shifted, taking on just a hint of that old familiar edge. Then, the galaxy will call, and humanity will answer. That's who we are. As Admiral Chen's ship departed for the edge of the galaxy, every species that watched it go understood a fundamental truth that would shape interstellar politics for millennia to come. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity not because humans were conquerors, but because they were protectors. And there was nothing in the universe more dangerous than someone who would sacrifice everything to defend the innocent. Humanity's fury had indeed reached its peak. And, in doing so, it had saved not just themselves, but the soul of galactic civilization itself.